Hello everyone, I'm Terry Duke, and welcome to my channel. So, the Game Awards were last week, and if you're anything like me, you didn't care. Either because you've never been up to date on the games being released, or your PC is too old to handle all the new games, or because the modern gaming industry today, let's be real, they've been releasing a lot of lazy, buggy disappointments. At which point you're better off waiting a couple of years for the games to be fixed up and to go on sale. In my specific case though, another thing I noticed as someone in his late 20s with a family and a job, it's that discovering new games with complex stories and complex gameplay mechanics is becoming really difficult, because these take time and energy, neither of which I have a lot of. That's not to say I never play any new games, it's more that the games tend to be more new to me, as opposed to just brand new. And today, well, I just want to make another video like the one I did last year, essentially sharing my gaming experiences with you from 2024, and ranking them by order of preference. Hopefully this will make for some interesting recommendations, assuming these are games you've never heard of, maybe some of them will be worth checking out. In terms of ranking the games when they vary in genre, quality, and ambition, the only factor being considered to rank the games is the gaming experience itself. Was the gaming experience memorable? Was the game so good that it made me excited to come back to the game? That's what's going to matter the most. With that said, let's get on with it. Starting at number 11, we have Scorn. Scorn is a horror maze game of sorts that was released around 2 years ago, and I remember it being fairly hyped at the time because of its unique visuals. So in Scorn, as the unnamed protagonist, you're exploring some strange world where machine and flesh intertwine in every aspect, from the tools to the very environment. As you move from place to place, there are puzzles that you need to solve in order to progress, as well as the gradual appearance of monsters that'll try and kill you. And honestly, there's just not that much else to say about the game, at least to the extent that I played it. And it's my biggest issue with the game really, the lack of a concrete plot. We don't know anything about the main character, there is no dialogue, no interaction, hardly any lore at all, and no music whatsoever, so the atmosphere itself feels dead. If I was to give the game a generous interpretation for this creative decision, it's that the game is trying to make you feel irrelevant, in that, symbolically, the protagonist is merely a cog in a massive machine, so your ability to affect your surroundings, or to even reflect on them, doesn't matter. And if that's what they were going for, I get it, but it's not for me. The game needs more depth for me to get into it. I just wasn't invested all that much. To me, Scorn was a 4 out of 10. At number 10, we have Lucius. The simplest way to describe Lucius is, imagine the Omen film, but from the perspective of the child. So in the game, as the titular character, you are the child of some wealthy politician living in a huge manor, and you're also secretly the son of Lucifer, who will occasionally visit you at night to give you powers and instruct you to claim more souls for him. So the main goal in the game is to kill as many people within the manor as possible, but without ever raising suspicion. Lucius is given powers of telekinesis to affect the environment around him, as well as telepathy to trick people. And so every murder must be made in a way as to look like a lethal accident. And simultaneously, to avoid raising suspicions, Lucius can do chores around the house like grabbing dirty laundry and bringing it to the laundry room so as to seem like a good boy. For a game, I absolutely love this concept. My biggest issue with the game is the execution, pun intended. Lucius very much feels like the older Hitman games in that, in every stage, you have a large map, a target, and hardly any instructions on what to do and where to go. So it's really up to the player to explore around and try different things until they figure out how to take out the target. But unlike the Hitman games, where there are multiple ways of killing the target and it's up to you to experiment, Lucius only has one way to do so, and if you don't figure it out right away, you'll be spending a lot of time not knowing what to do. I was relieved in a way to know that this wasn't just me. A lot of critics complained about the game not being clear enough on what you had to do. I found myself often following a guide online while playing the game, and every single time I took out a target, I would just sit there thinking, there is no way I would have figured that out. So Lucius is a great concept, but the gameplay itself is just too unintuitive, so it's a 5 out of 10. At number 9 though, showing in stark contrast that simplicity is bliss, this is my dream setup. This game is as light as it is satisfying. My dream setup is a building simulator where all you do is build your dream gaming room essentially. You have a 3D map, tons of tools and accessories, and you just get to it. Want to have a crazy setup with massive monitors, all the RGB lights you could dream of, have all the consoles and everything? That's the whole point of this game. My dream setup came out last year, but they've been updating it regularly, adding DLCs to create other kinds of dream rooms, like your dream kitchen, or recently, your dream garage. In terms of gaming experience, it's very straightforward and easy to learn, and it's a very relaxing game. By that alone, I had more fun with this game than the previous two, but it's not perfect. The main issue I have with the game right now is that there is no clear way of making multiple rooms into one. Like, okay, you have your gaming room, your perfect bathroom and kitchen and garage, but there's no way of naturally making these rooms connect. I've done a whole apartment a while ago and it just looks kind of weird, so I'm hoping they make it possible soon, especially with the new garage update. It just makes sense. But yeah, if you want a simple, silly, but relaxing game where you can build the game room you'll never have, my dream setup is for you. It's a 6 out of 10. At number 8, this is Wolfenstein: The New Order. I've been wanting to try out a Wolfenstein game for a long time, and New Order is the first of the recent reboot in the series. So if you're not familiar, Wolfenstein is basically a series set in an alternate timeline where the Nazis conquered the world by achieving high levels of tech. And in New Order you play as Blazkowicz, a Polish Jewish veteran who fights the Nazi regime in covert operations with the resistance movement. As interesting as the setting is, and as cool as the visuals are, ultimately the New Order is just a first-person shooter with all of the gameplay mechanics you'd expect from such a game. And as such, I don't actually have a whole lot to say about it. It's a decent shooter, you get to fight sci-fi Nazis, and that's pretty much it. It's a 7 out of 10. Similarly, at number 7 we have the sequel, Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus. It's basically what you would expect from a shooter and a sequel. Better graphics, mildly improved combat, story gets a little more interesting, but it also ended a little abruptly in my opinion. The Wolfenstein games made for a decent gaming experience, but I did not love them so much that I'll be going back to them anytime soon. The biggest appeal the games have is obviously the setting and aesthetic, but once you go past that, there's just not that much else. So, again, 7 out of 10. At number 6, this shooter was more memorable though. This is Shadow Warrior. In Shadow Warrior, you play as Lo Wang, an assassin whose demeanor is basically that of Deadpool without the superpowers. He's a badass who knows he's a badass, and half of his language is jokes and one-liners.
Not to sound like a racist, but all you demons really do look alike.
And in the game, Lo Wang is tasked with retrieving a mystical katana sword, but when he tries, a bunch of things happen, and the world is suddenly attacked by demons. And so the point of the game is to fight the demons and find the sword. In terms of gameplay, while you can use guns, you also have a katana which you can use to cut enemies to pieces, and it works surprisingly well, not to mention it's super satisfying. And for that alone, the game ranks higher. The only drawbacks in terms of shooter is the lack of variety in weapons, as well as the lack of variety in the enemies. Most enemies use the same tactics, and the guns are few, with an emphasis on upgrading them instead. So there's very little room for experimentation as a result. The story is also a bit all over the place. There is a somewhat interesting premise with the demons attacking the world, and there's elements of Japanese mythology and whatnot, but because most of the game is spent with a protagonist that doesn't take anything too seriously, it's also difficult for the player to take anything too seriously. It's also one of those instances where the game sometimes tries too hard to be funny, so a lot of corny comments kinda fall flat. But it was still a fun game overall. The katana fighting is really cool, and it got me to play the second game, though I barely started it, so it's not in this video. Still, it's all around a 7 out of 10. Bringing some variety at number 5, this is Manor Lords. And I won't get too much into that one since I made a dedicated review which you can check out, but in short, Manor Lords is a medieval village building simulator with everything from that you would expect. You build houses, grow crops and hunt for food, and craft weapons and armors to build an army in case of raids. The coolest thing about the game though is also the biggest drawback, which is that the game has a single developer working on it. The game was made by a single person, so it's really impressive, but it also means there's only one person working on it. As such, the game was in development for years, and it only came out in early access. Although updates are still coming, they take time, and they're still not even close to a full game, at least when you think of all the features still missing. That's not to say the game is bad, mind you, it looks beautiful, the level of management is complex but easy to learn, and you can still play some game modes to their completion. The game is also fairly stable, with bugs and crashes minimal. Manor Lords is a pretty good game, but it still has a long way to go before it's complete. This is an 8 out of 10 nonetheless. At number 4 we have Warhammer 40,000 Mechanicus. As I said, you're not getting many new games in my reviews, so I'm leaving Space Marine 2 for other people to play and review. I'm still very late to the party with this franchise. So instead I played Mechanicus, which came out years ago. Mechanicus, as the game suggests, centers on the Adeptus Mechanicus, which in the game comes across a planet that holds a large Necron vault. As the expedition attempts to study it, the Necrons begin awakening, and so the point of the game is to beat the Necrons before they can fully reawake. Gameplay-wise, the game takes a turn-based strategy approach, as you deploy your units on a tactical map, and take turns with the enemy until one side has won. Each mission brings resources and XP to upgrade your main units, the Tech Priests, which can be modded by adding more weapons to them and other crazy upgrades until while they look absolutely insane. The game has been compared to the XCOM games, which I agree with. In a sense, it's largely the same, but with Warhammer 40,000. And in general, the game works pretty well if you like this type of game. The music and visuals are all around very immersive, the gameplay itself is fairly easy to grasp. Honestly, I don't have many complaints, this was a solid game. If there is to be some complaints, it would be the story itself. The story centers on the many leaders of the different departments of the Mechanicus expedition, from a religious fanatic to the leader of the Scutari and the chief scientist, as they argue with each other on the best course of action. But there is no cutscene, none of the characters are voiced, and while the game gives you many different options on what missions to take in the time you have until the Necrons wake up, the missions themselves have little value to the story itself, as I found myself skipping through most of the dialogue just to get to the point. But as a strategy game, I enjoyed playing it, and it was certainly better than the previous 40,000 game I played, Relics of War. Next up, I should probably try Dawn of War, maybe it'll be in my next year's game reviews. As for Mechanicus, this is an 8 out of 10. At number 3 we have Viscera Cleanup Detail. Best way I can summarize this game is, imagine Doom, but instead of being the Doomslayer going on a rampage, you're the janitor that has to clean up the mess afterwards. This is quite literally what VCD is. It's a janitor simulator, but one that takes you to space. And so each mission sends you to a different planet or space station to clean up a mess of dead bodies, sometimes human, sometimes alien. And to do that, you're given an incinerator, a mop, and disposable bins. So you grab all the bodies, all of the body parts, the bullet casings, the alien carcasses, and just throw everything in the incinerator. And then you mop. And that's the game essentially. There isn't really anything in terms of story that connects one mission to the other. Instead, each mission will leave clues as to what happened through people's writings in that one mission. And quite often, the game is dropping Easter eggs and references to other movies and games. For example, there is a mission set on a jungle planet, where bodies will be hung up from trees completely skinned, and you'll hear a growling here and there, clearly in reference to the Predator movies. Another mission has you on some kind of Arctic space station, with reports speaking of a shape-shifting alien, a clear reference to The Thing. But it can be even more subtle than that. In one mission set in a robots factory, you can find a tablet with a message from some CEO called White talking about how they're in the Empire business, a reference to Walter White from Breaking Bad. And while there is no main storyline, another component of the setting that I really enjoy is the obvious critique of capitalism, through the hints that the janitors in this game have low pay, horrible working conditions, and basically no respect from corporate. Each mission starts with a vague summary of what happened and talking down to you. Your janitor is also randomly generated, and you'll either be fairly old, as in, you should be retired but aren't, or you're barely 18 years old, hinting at child labor. And all you get from a perfect score of completely cleaning a scene is the Employee of the Month award. And if that's not subtle enough, bit of a spoiler here, but an entire mission has you clean up dead janitors that went on strike against the company. So that's VCD, a cool cleaning simulation with an awesome surrounding premise. The only things I enjoyed less is that the game feels like it was designed around co-op multiplayer, as in you can play missions with friends and other people online, which is fine if that's your thing, but I don't like playing online, and playing alone with maps that are sometimes huge meant that they also often get too grindy. Like, you're doing tasks that you know would go faster if you had someone with you, and I'm just saying, it shouldn't feel that way. There's also gameplay elements that just become annoying over time, like part of the joke on the working conditions being horrible is that the tools themselves will often fail you. The bin disposer, for example, can sometimes glitch and make body parts come out, which achieves nothing other than making more of a mess. There is a forklift in the game for reaching higher cleaning spots, but it will purposefully bug out on you, sometimes throw you off, and if you have a bin full of debris or a bucket full of blood, those will be thrown off as well, and make a mess. It's meant to be funny, but the joke gets old and at some point, you just want to be able to clean. But I'm rambling now. Overall, still a very good game. To me, this is an 8 out of 10. Very similarly at number 2, this is Crime Scene Cleaner. This is another janitor simulator, although this one was released this year. And unlike VCD, which gives you a big setting but focuses on co-op, Crime Scene Cleaner is a single-player game and gives you a bit more story. So in this game, you play as Kowalski, a janitor who lost his wife in an accident and whose daughter has cancer, and the medical bills are piling up. As a result, Kowalski has taken up cleaning messes by the mafia and other private clients from the crime underworld. From there, the gameplay is similar. You show up to each crime scene, which all have their own challenges, from the number of bodies to the size of the map itself, and you have to clean everything, take away all the evidence, and so on. While I find the setting of VCD more interesting, for a gaming experience, Crime Scene Cleaner is just better, as it indirectly fixes many of the issues I had with VCD, and brings elements I vastly prefer. For instance, your tools aren't designed to screw you over, so that's a whole layer of annoyance that is absent here, but Crime Scene Cleaner also offers a leveling system that is completely absent from VCD. So after each mission, based on how well you did and how much money you found, you earn skill points that can then invest in multiple skill trees to either upgrade your tools or your cleaning skills. For example, you can upgrade yourself to leave less bloody footprints from walking on blood. You can increase the speed at which you clean, and even buy detergents that amplify your mop and sponge. So the missions get more challenging, but you also become more skilled at cleaning, and it's all the more satisfying. Because of all this, the game runs smoother, and there's a storyline, although simple, that keeps you engaged throughout. Only drawback? Not enough missions. With only 10 crime scenes total, the game definitely leaves you wanting more. I'm hoping for a sequel here, or some DLCs at least, to make more out of the game. But hey, if a game leaves you wanting more, that's generally a good thing, right? Great game, solid 8 out of 10. Before we get to the first game, I want to give 2 honorable mentions here. I received another 2 games for free this year, but I just wasn't in the right headspace to give them a try. However, they both look really cool, and I still have my heart set on really playing them, so even though I haven't, I just want to shout them out. First, there is Empires of the Undergrowth. This is a strategy game where you control an ant colony and fight off against other bugs. Honestly, this is such a cool concept, and looking at the trailer, as well as the reviews, this seems like a very fun game to play. To me, it feels like Bugs Life meets Total War, and I'm here for it. The second game is Workers and Resources, Soviet Republic. If you like building simulators, this one takes you to the Soviet Union, where you can build your ideal planned city, and make sure to meet all of the needs of the workers there. I tried it for a bit, but the layers of management came off as fairly complex, so there's definitely a learning curve if you haven't played other building simulators before. But it's also a game that looks really fun, so hopefully these 2 games will make it into the next year's video. But finally, at number 1, we have Kingdom Come Deliverance. Either you know, or you don't. As I said in the intro, discovering new games, especially big games, is harder for me than it's ever been. But when my family went on vacation, and I took my own paid vacation from work, I was alone at home with nowhere to go and nothing to do for the first time since the pandemic, and I was determined to pick a new game and enjoy it. And that game was Kingdom Come Deliverance. KCD, for short, is an RPG that takes you to the Kingdom of Bohemia in the 1400s. You play as Henry, the son of a blacksmith, whose village is destroyed in an attack, leading you on a big adventure throughout Bohemia, seeking revenge for the attack on your village, as well as fame and glory by serving the many lords of the region in their political intrigues, and making a name for yourself. And as an RPG, the game is as vast, beautiful, and complex as you'd expect, with a leveling system, skills that range from strength to charisma to stealth, the ability to craft potions using alchemy, and tons of enemies to be fought and loot to be found. The game was released over 6 years ago to a polarized reception, but generally, the people who love the game and the people who hate it tend to do so for the same reason, and it's the realism. KCD is not your typical fantasy journey where you can cut your way through endless hordes of enemies. KCD is meant to be not only historically accurate, but also realistic, especially with the combat. The combat in this game works so fundamentally differently from any other game that you basically need to let go of any gaming notion you've ever had to really understand it. But when you do, it can actually be a really fun game to play, as you learn to manage things like your cardio and learn to parry attacks effectively. But beyond the combat itself, the story is great and has a lot of funny moments sprinkled throughout. The character of Henry is well fleshed out, and I was really invested in his journey. And really, this is how I can sum up my vacation. My 1 week of being a bachelor in the past 3.5 years, and it was playing Kingdom Come Deliverance for the first time. It took me, I would say, a good 15 hours to really get a better hang of it, and it was initially frustrating. But speaking of the game again now, even though I played it 2 months ago, is making me wish to play again, which speaks to the gaming experience itself and why I'm ranking it at number 1, with a solid 9 out of 10 for me. I could probably go on some more about Kingdom Come Deliverance and why I really enjoyed this game, but I'm feeling quite hungry. So that's gonna be it for today. Let me know though, what are your gaming experiences from 2024? Are there some games you would recommend that I should check out? Well, feel free to let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, if you enjoyed the video, well, you know the drill, like and subscribe. But anyway, happy holidays, and I'll see you next year.